So when we talk about technique, we talk about fast music often. Oh, he has very good technique. He can play very fast. But technique is also how you approach one single sound, for example, how you make a legato, how you balance the chords. That's also a technique. There's also a know-how.
Well, the results for the second round have been announced, and I'm here with one of the competitors who's made the second round, Alexander Gadjiev. Alex, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, you're no stranger to competitions. You've participated in many, and you actually took the top prize in Sydney and Hamamatsu, playing mostly freely chosen repertoire. What's it like playing only one composer?
Whoa, completely different experience. I could say it's almost like taking a microscope instead of using a big telescope where you're trying to grasp the whole world. I don't know. In Sydney, I literally went from playing Haydn to Beethoven symphonies in Liszt transcription, more contemporary Messiaen and Karl Weil pieces, Prokofiev, Shostakovich. There was a bit of everything. In a way, it's a depiction of the world, of the musical world that I choose. And with Chopin, is really like, you don't have so many distractions in a way. Because when you're practicing so many different styles and so many different pieces, you cannot concentrate 120% just on that one composer. What I really tried to do in the past months was to really dig into his somehow into his way of, I would say, trying to perceive the world.
Could you tell us a little bit about what you found under the microscope? What sorts of discoveries are you making in the laboratory?
Let's put it this way. I had a thought about how different composers deal with music generally. And I think in a way it's like they have their own, we could call it space time. They have their own, let's say, texture, this way of using the instrument, this way of creating sonorities, this way of using the pedal, this way of using harmonies, of connecting them. So you create your own world as a composer. And I think in his case, specifically in Chopin's case, there is this space time is always like deformed in a very flexible way. There are no really square cuts. You can feel that there are threads throughout, very regular threads at the same time, like that it has a very organic shape, one could say. It's still very classically rooted in terms of form, especially in terms of construction of phrases and so on. I think in that period music was getting more and more personal. Something like, let's say, if we take the Baroque period, in a way there are a lot of rules, a lot of, let's say, canonic things that happen. Therefore, we don't need so many indications of dynamic, of slurring, because many things are implied. Many things are the way they are, the way they were, the way we know they sound good. And I think in that period, it starts more and more, people start more and more to look for very personal ways of listening and hearing this sound world. And he is definitely the pinnacle of this.
Chopin explores a kind of non-Euclidean geometry or space-time, but in the Baroque period, maybe there's something more like a grid.
Yes, amazing. Great, really. There is stability, there is a system of values, even. Like there are codified ways of doing certain things. I think with Chopin, these codified ways obviously exist because he comes from that tradition, but he's really exploring a different geometry, as you said. A different geometry is beautiful because you can imagine this triangle being a little bit shaped differently. It's still a triangle, maybe just stretched a little differently, but at the same time. So in this, let's say, element of tradition, there is great inner freedom, a lot of, I would say, a lot of fragrances, even within a single bar. I was telling you, I just had a very nice practicing session. I was practicing the Barcarolle, and so many details in this piece. Like even in one single bar, you get, I don't know, an accent, then a slur that goes, I don't know, starts from the second beat and it goes over the bar, and at the same time there is a crescendo but a hairpin of a decrescendo. So many different things, and you're like, wait, but this is so somehow contradictory, even in a way, because he wanted to express so many things, so many nuances and so many really ways of not just listening to music, but listening to music the way he wanted. So let's say deforming this space time the way he wanted, not in a general way.
So, what does your Barcarolle smell like today?
Well, I don't know. I don't know. I had a conversation last night with one of the competitors, Leonora Armellini, who also passed, and she's also a great artist. I was telling her I feel this piece is somehow some of the, in a way, the lightest music he ever wrote, the most refined, but also the lightest in terms of spirit. Like it smells just well. A lot of his music smells also a little ill, in a way. And she was saying no, because no, actually, I feel that, like, she was feeling that underneath this wellness, there is actually some hidden misery, perhaps. But to be honest, I don't know. Even today, while practicing, I don't think so. Like, obviously, there are moments. There are moments. Being such a rich piece of music, there are moments in which he goes to, I don't know, minor modes and different turns, different, like, bittersweet elements. But at the same time, I really feel fragrance of Venice on a very very wonderful, maybe spring, late afternoon or early morning. Not so many people. Like a sigh. He's out sighing all of the all of the sadness, and then starts something really, actually, really beautiful.
Towards the end of the Barcarolle, there's a moment in C sharp major. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Dolce sfogato.
Okay, tell us about this moment,
Oh my
and
god.
what do you want to do with it in your second round?
Okay, let's start. So this moment we actually don't know, because there are two versions and they are opposite. In one edition it's written sfogato. In another edition is written sfocato. And they have in Italian opposite meanings. Sfogato means, just to let it out. I'm letting it out. So this G sharp, you really sing it out with all of your voice. Sfocato is out of focus. So it's literally the opposite. I don't know. I usually like it sfogato, so very outsung, if this is a word. But at the same time, maybe the more blurry version is more poetic, even. Actually, now that I think about it, it probably is. I was reading these days. I was trying to understand for myself why did I choose Kawai, because I'm playing on Kawai instrument. And I was trying to understand why did I actually like this the most, for this music especially. And then the answer I came to is there is something extremely beautifully blurred in it. And it reminds me of an Italian poet, Leopardi, from the same period of Chopin. He's, like, often in Italy compared to Chopin in a way. And there is one element in his, let's say, poetic writing, where he talks about the beauty of the vague, of the undefined. So something that is undefined, like a sunset, let's say, it's by definition is beautiful, because our intellect, which always goes on dissecting things and separating, all of a sudden we realize, like, maybe actually it's not everything can be dissected rationally, and suddenly you're just overwhelmed by this combo of colors. Things just melt into each other. There is like a general undertone of poeticness.
Beauty, in a sense, is exceeding the rational. It's something beyond our comprehension, yet it has a form, it has a shape, and we can perceive it.
Yes, and we perceive it in a way that cannot be defined completely. So it's vague. And in this piano, actually, there is an element of melting, which for me is so important for Chopin's music.
I also know that you're somebody who's very attentive to the polyphony of Chopin. So how do you reconcile Chopin's polyphony, which on some level implies distinction of voices, with this melting, which implies
Yeah.
fusion of a texture?
I would say there are moments somehow. It's music. Of course, it's very architecture music, but at the same time, it's music of a lot of moments that intertwine with each other. So there are moments with more polyphonic things, and then suddenly there are less polyphonic moments. So I think it's really up to the ability of the performer to get in and out of this mode very quickly. I think to be maybe suddenly in a more polyphonic um, listening way of listening, and then again more condensed, then maybe more related to melody, then maybe more harmonically. It's very very dynamic. It's very dynamic. Also, it depended on the piano. It depended on the piano because when I played on that Fazioli, I really could connect more to this polyphonic somehow sphere of Chopin.
Full disclosure, I know Alex from a couple weeks ago. We met in Cremona, and I heard him play his first and second round programs on a Fazioli, which in many ways is I would say the opposite of the Shigeru Kawai in terms of it emphasizes registral distinction
Very
and
much.
separation of layers.
Yes, and it has also very distinct, very pearl-like
Mhm.
sonority, which maybe also helps in this regard to create this different layering. I think it fits very well. For example, I like very much on Kawai French music, Debussy, especially Ravel, and it has this also very watercolor quality, you know. And I tend to like also very much the late period of Chopin. So I'm playing the Mazurkas, 56, then the Polonaise Fantasie, Barcarolle, even Fourth Ballade. And I think that watercolor quality starts to be very prominent in his music. At the same time, it has a very singing tone, which is probably even more important. So this the combination of the two, the melting and the singing, the foreground and the background.
Of course, music is temporal and it's unfolding, but just in general, how do you reconcile the impressionistic qualities of Chopin with this sort of very logical, forward driven unfolding of events?
Very, very, very good question. And it makes me think of, let's say, the word structure, right? Which is a. I mean, I live in Germany, in German-speaking countries since 2013. So the word Struktur is something I've heard 2 trillion of times. It's everywhere from breakfast to lunch to into the sleep. So it's a word that I've even without dealing with music, it's something that comes into you, even if you don't want it. So how do we reconcile this, let's say, moment to moment approach to music with a more temporal, organized, structured? And I think the answer of this it is a question actually that I ask myself many times. Why do people say sometimes, "Oh, he has a good perception of form," or "He doesn't have a good perception of form"? Something like this, to an interpreter, even not just a composer. And I think the answer that I came to is that form is something that depends on the intensity of listening. So the moment you listen very intensely, like there is really energy from the inside going into listening, automatically the form will be created because you are somehow your attention, your concentration towards what you're doing will guide it towards as the word says, concentration, right? You will concentrate the things. Even though there will be many moments, the concentration will keep them united. I think that's extremely important. It's difficult to practice, difficult to grasp maybe outside of an abstract, let's say, way.
How much of this is achieved in the hall, in the moment of performance? You know,
Very
you
much,
said it's hard to practice
very
this.
much,
Yeah,
very
so
much.
Talk about being in Philharmonic Hall and how that influenced your own narrative interpretation.
I think it does. It does because you feel for sure a higher level of concentration, and you have to accept it. You have to be in that zone. Even sportsmen talk about the zone. Many athletes talk about being in the zone, and I think it's a similar thing. Like obviously, you feel this energy from the people that surround you if you are keen on it. You can also lock yourself and don't care about anything. I don't think that's going to work very well. So you have to accept this and filter it through your system and make it in a way that it helps you, to concentrate literally, that it gives you more energy. And I think that's how also you will drive the narrative in a sensible way.
There really is a kind of competition, if you will, between focusing so much on the music that you lose track of your environment, you lose track of the audience, but you're in the world of the music, right? And the other side, which is being so aware of the audience that you're maybe really externalizing the music for them and you're focusing less on detail. As a pianist, I've struggled with this my whole life. Sometimes I'll play and I'll forget about the audience, and that can have positive and negative effects. And sometimes I'll be too aware of them and it can lead to nerves or other things. Although I might be communicating phrases better, they might be excessive. My rubatos might be indulgent, for example, because I'm trying to get you to understand what I'm saying. You know what I
Yes.
mean? So, what is your ideal, right, in sort of reconciling these?
I don't know. Maybe one could go back to say, for instance, that music is very related to speech, right? So the moment we are on stage, we are actually speaking, especially in such music as Chopin's music. He loved very much theater, opera. So there is certainly an element of discourse, of speech in his music. So I think it goes back to asking yourself, what kind of speech would you like to have? So how would you like to speak to people in general? We have to look at that music and try to understand how is that speech structured, right? Is it dramatic? Is it, I don't know, consolatory? Is it reflective? Is it meditative? Is it joyful? What kind of tone of voice? Like if I talk about something very dramatic, I will say something like this. Yeah. I will not try to console you in this way,
I
right?
noticed that your tone of voice at the beginning of the Fourth Ballade is actually very extroverted. It's not this inward, appearing out of the mist. It's very rhetorical, and you really are addressing the crowd at the beginning.
Yes, I think the opening. Well, the ballad is in F minor, but at the same time, this opening is so radiant. Like let's say we wouldn't know the piece, right? Let's say we don't know the piece and we just hear this opening. What are they, 8, 12 bars? So the opening bars, I wouldn't think it's going to be what it is, right? I would not immediately connect that to the following. So I think it's also great, let's say, from a one could say from a dramaturgical theatrical point of view, to create a separation between the two. I think that the separation is there. It's really as if there is this image from my teacher in Salzburg, from Gililov, and he's, I think, a great connoisseur of especially this kind of music. He feels it in a very special way, and he had this image at the beginning as if you are in a garden, in a beautiful garden full of cherries and flowers and a lot of smells, and there is this C which just changes everything in one note.
You mentioned your teacher at the Mozarteum, Pavel Gililov. He placed in the 1975 Chopin competition. Name a couple of things that are really special about his musicianship.
Well, for instance, one thing that always stays with me is to try to feel that music goes always up. So there is an element of uplifting, let's say, quality, especially in his music. And I have to say, at the beginning, I struggled a lot with this, and sometimes I still do, because I think generally I would maybe by nature tend to go rather down, like very rhythmically oriented, like very trying to feel the beat very much, and a little bit having maybe even this nervous quality. I don't know. When I was a child, I always loved listening a lot to Beethoven and Prokofiev. So a lot of this driving force, which obviously I think has to have also a rhythmical, uh, just a rhythmical energy behind it, right? Whereas in Chopin's music, you know, going back also to talking about these contradictions that we mentioned at the beginning, there is always this element of avoiding. That's another thing that he mentions often: avoiding the downbeat, avoiding the bar, going away from the bar, and from the downbeat of the bar line. Like somehow almost bypassing it. And these are things that in a way are very, very hard to describe in words, very hard to describe in words, even to understand in words. Like I as I told you, I had to really feel it first. It has to do a lot with feelings also, because I wouldn't say there is this one formula. It depends, of course, with the more pieces you know about, the more pieces, let's say, you work with Chopin, the more you obviously get to know the style. Some things repeat. For instance, the bass having very often the dot. So a light bass is not just a staccato bass. It's not an hysteric going away. It's just indicates some lightness to it. But at the same time, this lightness, and you have to really feel it. So if I just say it to you and I tell you, oh, it's light, understand. It's not about understanding. You have to somehow make it organically part of your way of talking.
So Gililov helped you play Chopin more up in the air, a little less grounded. You can't lose track of some kind of underlying pulse or some sort of grounded reference point, even
Yes,
if Chopin is taking place in the air.
yes. I mean, at the same time, let's not forget he comes also from the tradition of basso continuo, and from a like baroque, classical baroque tradition. And you can also trace a lot of his, especially early music, to that tradition, with a lot of, let's say, schemes, and coming from there, just embellished in a new form. So obviously, I think these people really felt the time differently than we do now.
Yeah, and Chopin was not only was he grounded in the Baroque classical tradition, but when you mentioned the schemas of the 18th century, these were tonal patterns that were like grammatical foundations for improvisation. And so, of course, we should bring up the fact that you're in a competition right now solely dedicated to Chopin, and yet nobody is improvising anything. You yourself are capable of this. I listened to you improvise an encore in Cremona. When you play Chopin, do you bring a kind of improvisatory spirit to it?
Yeah, I think it's impossible not to, in a way, because his music is really too it's too rich. It's too rich. It's too somehow it's too smelly. It has too many fragrances not to bring a different one each time. Like there is a, let's say, a harmonic progression, right? And then there is a surprise, for instance. And this surprise, you can handle it like this, or you can handle it like this, maybe, you know, or you can handle it like this. So each time you can do something different with it, and it depends on where you started from in a way. Like you cannot really force yourself to be always in the same state of mind and of spirit. Of course, there are moments in his music that are so strong and so defined that somehow they drive you in that almost same um, state of mind and of spirit each time. For example, the second sonata. When I think about the beginning of the second sonata, it's just so strong that you're just sucked into that space every time. Of course, it's nuanced, but there is not much room for uh, making things up. It's a very strong state of emotion.
There's a kind of historical irony, I suppose, in the fact that Chopin was an improviser, but he also wrote such detailed works, and he wrote so many of them. At least he was partly responsible in his music for what would end up becoming the concert pianist tradition. Pianists began to professionalize in order to play Beethoven sonatas and Chopin works live for a stage. And if you're going to spend all your time learning that repertoire, you might not be able to have the same basis and experience in improvisation.
Myself, I come from this tradition of really trying to learn and get to the core of this, let's say, message of each work. For example, when we worked a lot when I was younger with my father, we would go even over and over again through the same pieces for a long time, and not just to perfect it, let's say, technically, but to always somehow be even more involved into it at the same time. So I understand very well that, given the amount of repertoire we have, it's very hard to imagine that people would improvise in every style, and like we have to be able somehow to face music from, I don't know, even the 1600s until most contemporary things. So I understand why historically this happened, why the improvisation, let's say, got a little lost, and we concentrated just on that. At the same time, for me, what was important was the discovery of Keith Jarrett, which is, to me, probably, with especially with one album, which is the Samber concerts, 6 concerts he recorded in Japan, is probably some of the greatest music performed. I don't know, written, certainly not written, but performed live.
What is it about Keith Jarrett's style or universe or atmosphere that captures you?
You said it right, universe. So each of them is really a universe. First of all, he's like in Chopin, his narrative quality to me is just incredible. So he's really telling a story, you know. He's really telling a story with so many languages. It's not just sometimes it's a ballads in I don't know, in a, let's say, more American style, And of course there is jazz, there is blues, there is a lot of influence from the music of the 20th century, a lot of, like, sometimes Shostakovich, not even harmonies or not just the musical, let's say, content, but more of this atmosphere of, like, dizzy craziness in a way. So there is also this obviously rhythmical drive, which then also the melodic invention is just so, I don't know, endless. He really talks through music. I mean, I wouldn't be able perhaps to write a script, but I do feel a speech when I hear such music, and so it has a lot of very human qualities. Also, it sounds so beautiful. He's just such a, this. I think this proves once more that when you are really in the music, somehow you defy technique in a way.
In a way, what you're saying is this mechanical aspect is taken for granted and becomes automatic if you have a real intention and you really know what you're trying to express.
Yes, but I think we should also stop on the word mechanical, because I think there are many misconceptions there. It sounds like also something related to speed for some reason. So when we talk about technique, we talk about fast music often. Oh, he has very good technique. He can play very fast. But technique is also how you approach one single sound, for example, how you make a legato, how you balance the chords. That's also a technique. There's also a know-how and know how to do things. Like I think the great pianists also of the past, when we listen to these old recordings, they sound incredible. You know, even maybe sometimes they play a little. Some of them have incredible, crazy tempi, but some of them have maybe even a little slower tempi, but at the same time, such level of dedication towards each sound that it sounds as if it's incredibly fast, because there is so much information into each sound. There is so much differentiation. I wanted also to mention that I just started actually a course in improvisation in Stuttgart with Noam Sivan, who is I think one of the people pushing the most this idea of improvisation, also in an academic pianistic sphere.
Written music can be a wonderful source for improvisation exercises. In addition to reading and playing the vast piano repertoire, you can also explore it creatively and expand your improvisation vocabulary along the way.
Piano competitions get a bad name, and they probably should. I mean, we all criticize them, but then we're all hypocrites, because then we say, okay, yes, but we should enter them, and they're good for our careers and whatnot. But I think there might be some misconceptions about how competitors feel about each other, because when I've gone to competitions, I just made great friends with the people I was competing with. It wasn't like this gladiator, arena where I'm battling to the death with some enemy. Can you talk about the social and the collegial and the friendly aspect of being at a competition?
It depends 120% on you. So if you want to make friends in competition, you will. And I have to say, I always had very nice memories of competitions. In Hamamatsu was great, was really great. I still remember one of the probably the best moments of my life was after I played the concerto with orchestra, and I came out of the hall, and there were people, like some contestants, who didn't even pass to the final, but they could stay until the end. They were just waiting for me, and we hugged all together. It was like such an epic moment, really worth the prize and everything else. And now here there is also a group of especially Italians, but not only. Um, Leonora, as I mentioned, also Alberto Ferro, Leonardo Pierdomenico. We were hanging around quite a bit. We're having meals together, talking a lot, and just supporting each other very much.
It helps that when you're on stage, it really feels like a recital. It doesn't, or at least it looks like it should feel like it's a recital. I mean, the jury is up in the balcony somewhere. Does it feel like you're just giving a performance? Like another engagement?
In a way, yes. I mean, we should. The thing is that when there is a massive hysteria about things, when people get too excited, we get a little out of focus. We lose clarity, and we should understand why these events exist. So competitions exist to somehow do your best and to get concerts, basically, to get visibility, to like connect to the public, to develop yourself, and to convey a message, and that's about it, in a way. There's not something metaphysical about it, right? The metaphysical element is what we created in our minds, that this is the end of the world and so on and so forth, right? And the jury is also doing a job. Like, they have a very hard job, right? They're listening to
Oh yeah.
so much Chopin. Like, for me, it would be extremely difficult. So in a way, it's just that. It's just people gathering and obviously competing. Some will be happy and some will be less happy. But I'm pretty sure that I don't know. Maybe even there we could come up obviously with even better solutions, with even better I don't know ideas of how doing that, like how to bring all these people together to do their best and not to think about, oh my god, this is such an incredible competition.
You don't look too nervous on stage. How do you deal with nerves? And you must be excited on some level if you keep advancing, and but you have to contain that.
You know, like probably like in all of these very intense things, you should direct your energy towards the positive side somehow. So it can either make you extremely nervous or it can make you extremely excited, or both things at the same time. Be conscious
Mhm.
about, for example, about yourself, about the way you practice. Try to add consciousness every day in your life is a very positive thing. Like to enter a sort of meditative state, you know, doesn't need to be necessarily through meditation or these kind of things, but to enter a state of thoughtfulness, like reflectiveness. I think it helps, you know, to create this space.
Do you see practicing as an almost meditative act?
When I'm able to practice well, yes, yes.
What does not practicing well look like?
Well, not practicing well, as we all know, it's when we practice unconsciously, when something bothers us and we get frustrated, right?
And then you repeat and you drill and you drill and you try to get it right. What's the antidote? What's the antithesis of that?
I mean, I am telling it to myself, first of all, right? The antidote, I think, is to stop, breathe, really. Breathe once, just 1 second, and then say, wait, what is actually not working and why? Just to look at the score. Sometimes looking at the score is a great thing. You just see black and white instructions, basically, and you just look and you say, okay, wait, that's what I have to do. And not every time it works. Sometimes you should just take a break. Sometimes taking a break, just 5-10 minutes, is a good idea, I think.
Well, I hear so much breath and life and also perfume and non-Euclidean space-time in your playing, and I just wish you the best. I As Garrett Golson said last week, competitions are a lottery, so you never know. When is your second round?
11th. 11th at 6:20 p.m.
All right, Alex. Let's stay in touch and good luck. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for listening and for having me here.